Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside my man from CBSSports.com. Sam Quinn is here on a Tuesday. Normally you're here on a Thursday. We're getting the peanut butter all mixed up in the chocolate, but you're here. Last time I talked to you, you had no stove or electricity. What was happening? Is that fixed?
I had no oven. The electricity had been fixed. The new oven is coming tomorrow. Since then, been eating a lot of dry cereal. I'm not going to trigger you. I know that bothers you, but that's how I've been managing these last 5 days.
It doesn't trigger me. When you teased me with that's not a top 5 weird Sam food take, I'm just like, I don't want to, get too far over our skis here, but I do want to pull some more of those out of you as we go along here.
Oh, please. I've got plenty.
All right. That's a good tease for the next Thursday show. Later in today's show, though, we're going to talk about Joel Embiid is ostensibly set to make his season debut. Who knows? Between now and tonight's tip-off, a lot could happen, so we don't want to rush that, but we'll talk about that. Klay Thompson returns to the Bay. It is Tuesday, so we'll do some overreactions, and we'll have our team of the night. But first, the NBA Cup is upon us once again. We're going to do a little primer here. You got the Knicks at the Sixers tonight, and the Mavs at Golden State. For people who don't remember how this thing works, 6 groups of 5 teams. You got 3 in the East and 3 in the West. Winner of each group plus a wild card from each conference advances to the knockout stage. Final 4 in Vegas. You get money for this whole bit. I'm going to start with this, Sam. I was just telling you, by the way, about Blue Sky. I spent the weekend migrating over to Blue Sky. A bunch of NBA Twitter people are over there, including our guy Howard Beck. And he can't do polls yet, but he put this out like just as like a response thing, basically asking like, what's your level of excitement for the NBA Cup? I put the question to you. How excited are you about this thing?
I'm pretty tepid. I'll enjoy it. I remember last year not really having expectations, and the quality of the basketball was good. As somebody who watches basketball every single night, I'm going to enjoy it simply because the players are going to try hard. They want the money.
Right.
That being said, my overall problem with the in-season tournament is that outside of the final, it's pretty indistinguishable from the regular season. It doesn't really feel like a tournament. It feels like we're just attaching arbitrary meaning and some colorful new courts to games that were otherwise going to be played. My take on this is that I think they need to make it feel more like a tournament. I have some ideas for that if you want to get into it. I think I can fix this whole thing that maybe it's too early to say is broken, but I want to make it more tournament-like.
Yeah, and you wrote a column about this for CBSSports.com that I encourage everybody to go and read. And I want to get into your changes because I thought some of them were good and some of them I'm not on board with. But before we even get to that component, so Adam Silver's whole idea for this thing, not, like they cribbed it from the Premier League and soccer where they have the FA Cup and the EFL Cup, now the Carabao Cup. And that's basically just like games on a Tuesday that like they're going to decide matter. They don't fiddle with anything. It just like the importance is that at the end of it, you get to say, hey, we won something, and you hold up a cup and you've got a trophy. I think with a little bit of time that people start buying into this thing.
I mean, I think that's reasonable, especially it's going to depend a lot on who competes for it in these early years, right? Like nobody wants to really say this, but LeBron winning it the first time means quite a bit. If it had been Pacers Magic last year, I guess they're in the same conference. If it had been Pacers Pelicans last year, I don't think that would have meant quite as much. But I think having the Lakers in it on one end and then Halliburton as kind of a like breakout star for the first event almost validated it sport wide because it made it feel like, oh, this is a real thing. It's generating actual traction. If we get good finalists and interesting storylines that emerge out of this in the first few years, that's going to go a long way. I'm not one of these people that think, oh, an in-season tournament can never work. It's not soccer, yada, yada, yada. My feeling is just like, make it distinct. Make it its own event. Don't just sneak it into the regular season and then tell us, oh, by the way, now we're in Vegas and they're playing for a trophy because, I don't know, say the Lakers won games on Tuesdays and Fridays instead of on Wednesdays and Sundays.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think part of it is that like as Americans, we're maybe a little resistant to, the soccer model of hardware and cups and things like that. I like the idea. I understand why Adam Silver was doing it. Maybe there's some sort of solve where, it's separate and independent from what happens during the regular season. But let's go through your changes because you wrote a whole column about this. You stayed up late last night. on behalf of CBS Sports and also the Beyond the Arc podcast, specifically to, I guess, fix the cup in its second year. Take us through your changes.
Okay, so the first thing I want to do, I think this one is a no-brainer. It's stealing from, I think, by far the most successful tournament format in American sports, March Madness. I don't know why this isn't a single elimination tournament. This feels like a no-brainer to me. Obviously, it's a little bit harder with 30 teams instead of 32.
Yeah.
I guess you're waiting for expansion to get to 32, but there are some fun things you can do to get to 32 in the interim. My suggestion is bring in international teams, but number one, I want a single elimination tournament. I think the way to do it, because realistically, you're going to count these games on the regular season standings, and one of the things that the NBA has given pushback for on a single elimination format is, oh, we can't have a team get knocked out in the first round and not play for 10 days for 2 weeks. My solution to this is that we just make losers brackets after every round so that every team is playing the same number of overall games. The advantage to doing that, aside from making the games even, is that at the end of the tournament, you can rank every team 1 to 32 based on where they finished. And my solution is that is your end of season tiebreaker. No more head-to-head, no more division record, none of that stuff. If two teams are tied at the end of the season, you just look at the tournament and say, okay, who did better there?
Yeah, I like the single elimination idea. You did just kind of address one of the questions that I had, which was, okay, you get knocked out early. Now what? Are you just like sitting around twiddling your thumbs? And I also do like kind of like separating it where, maybe the solve is, instead of it being 82 games and all these games count towards the regular season standings, that it's like you're taking a time out here to run this tournament, and the regular season now is 72 games or whatever it is. But then that also kind of messes with stats and how people look at them historically. So I think that there might be a little bit of pushback here. I like that idea best of all your ideas. Take us through 2 and 3, because 2 and 3, I was like, this is where you're getting a little far afield for me.
Look, I understand these are the ideas that are going to get a little bit wonkier and are more personal to me. My thought is, if the goal here is to draw in casual fans and to get people excited about basketball early in the season and make it feel distinct, I want to mess with the rules a little bit. I want to do the one that's obvious to me is, let's use the Elam ending. What's wrong with the Elam ending? We all loved it in the All-Star game when it created that super competitive ending in 2020. Personally, I think we should be using the Elam ending for everything. But the big advantage of using it for the tournament is that it guarantees we get a game-winning shot in every single game. You want to get people to tune into a game, especially later on? They now know they have a reason to do it because they're going to get a game-winning shot. So that's my first major change. No matter what, Elam ending in every single tournament game.
I have to stop you there. I don't like it. I don't like that. I mean, like you said, we all loved it in the All-Star. I've never liked it. I've always thought it's gimmicky.
Who cares if it's gimmicky? It fixes one of the biggest end-of-game problems. Do you enjoy the free throw fest at the end of games?
All right, so you've come to the wrong place here. This is a know your audience thing. I have a weird free throw kink. I like people who know how, like, one of the things that I liked the most about James Harden's game, maybe not so much now as back when he was in Houston, was like, he was an artist at drawing fouls. And I know it drives a lot of people nuts, but like that whole, like, I can get to the line whenever I want because I'm just like better with body control than you'll ever be. There's an art form to it. But again, I realize that I'm in the minority here.
I don't mind enjoying free throws. Like, I'm not going to take away from the free throw grifters. Like, you're right. There is something to that. What I don't like is the last minute of a competitive game turning into a different sport, right? Like, I want the end of a game to look like the rest of the game, not to be just like, oh, can we get the foul in time? Or like, can they miss one of these free throws so that we have a 3? And, oh, no, they're up 3. I guess we're going to foul them and take away any chance they had of tying the game at the 3-point line. That's what I don't like. I want them to actually play basketball down the stretch, not just turn it into a foul fest.
Am I misremembering this, or did they not do some of this in Summer League?
I honestly don't remember. I'm not a big enough Summer League person. They tend to pilot these rule changes in the G League. And my thought here is, if you want to experiment with stuff, a good way to do it is to have the best players in the world do it for a 5-game sample. And that leads into my next rule change idea. This is the most radical, I think. take any popular rule change idea that's ever been thrown out, whether it's let's add a 4-point line, or let's take away the corners like people have suggested, or let's use the fever rule where any ball off the rim is live. Every year, what I want to do is introduce one rule change to the tournament and say, this is the 4-point line year, or this is the no corner threes year, and just change the game just a little bit to give fans a new reason to tune in, a new reason to say, oh, this is so different from the regular season. It's worth checking out to see if I enjoy it. And it just gives teams that maybe are built a little bit less traditionally maybe a potential advantage. Why not? Let's throw it out there and see what sticks.
I like your idea that, and you threw this out on last week's Thursday show, the like corner 3-second violation. I kind of like that idea, just to like get more player movement so you can't just like camp yourself in the corner. The 4-point idea is interesting, but again, like then all of a sudden you're skewing the stats, right? Like now it's something completely different. And then are you I would assume you're a big stat guy, that you like looking at the numbers with the historic context. This would alter that.
I care about the stats, but only in as much as they tell us what's happening here and now. I'm not somebody who finds the long-term stats like historically sacred. If you ask me, frankly, like I think the easiest way to fix the idea that there's a 3-point problem in the NBA is I would change the league scoring. I would play by 4s and 3s instead of 3s and 2s. I get that that's such a big change and would affect the record book so much that very few people are probably going to be on board with that. I just don't look at the numbers as sacred. It's not like I don't feel like I need to look at Michael Jordan and look at LeBron James and look at whoever the next guy is and say like, oh, one guy had more of blank because of Y, and that ruins the comparison. Like, no, I think we can be adults about this and say, like, they all played in different eras. They played by different rules. So let's judge them according to the rules that they played under. What matters most to me is the quality of the overall product.
I would love for sports fans to be adults. It would be the first time ever. But I do appreciate you staying up late to put together the cup fixes. I actually am excited. I was, I guess, one of the few people who responded to Howard Beck's poll with, I am enthusiastic about this and looking forward to it. And I think it can develop into something good. My major beef with this whole thing is I get that the league wants to signal to the average casual fan, the not you and me, that, hey, this is a different thing. It's the cup game. So we've got these like super wacky over the top courts. Like, can't they be like a little cooler or classier? Like what's the design element here? Why does it have to hurt my retina?
I think the courts this year are slightly better.
They are.
I hated the runway last year. The runway
was awful.
It was terrible. The concentric circles and the solid colors are a little bit better. I think we still have room to improve there, but I'm with you. Like, it feels a little bit to me like you're just, slapping a fresh coat of paint on an otherwise identical product. Literally. And like, to us, that's fine because we clearly love regular season NBA basketball. I'd watch it with or without the new courts, frankly.
Right.
But my whole thing is just, I want this to feel like its own distinct thing, and it largely hasn't. It's only been 1 year. We'll see if this thing develops its own traditions, its own, all of that stuff as we go. But for now, my thought is I want to make this weird.
It's a little weird. It's a little weird. You want weirder, which I appreciate and also respect. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the actual basketball that's happening in the NBA Cup tonight, and 2 big nights for 2 big players. Joel Embiid ostensibly will make his season debut, and then after that, you've got Klay Thompson returning to the Bay. Both big events. We'll discuss that on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc. All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder that you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can leave us a comment on this episode. Just look below the play button on the Spotify app when you're in full screen mode. And you can tell us what you think about the show or leave us a question. All right, Joel Embiid. Not a great season for the Sixers. Not a great start for Joel Embiid. Injured, investigated. I lost track of how many investigations. They're 2-7, Sam. In theory, he will be making his debut tonight when they take on the Knicks. in the NBA Cup. What are your expectations for Joel Embiid, and can he save the Sixers? Because so far they've looked abysmal. They're 26 in net rating. They're an absolutely dreadful passing team. Tyrese Maxey is out for several weeks with a hamstring injury. I know it's early, but it's getting late early.
I'm going to zag here a little bit.
Okay.
Obviously, the 2-7 start is less than ideal, and they've had a lot of problems starting with the injuries. I think
Sixers story, less than ideal. Go ahead.
I think the way this season has started for the East as a whole has worked out very, very well for them, in that you look at the top of the standings and the Cavs and Celtics are so far ahead of the field that you
Yes.
almost don't have to worry about seeding anymore because you're never going to catch them, right? Like, it's not something you can get it out of your head. We're not going to be first, we're not going to be second. But everybody else is 500 or worse. So if you're 2-7, yeah, that's not great. But you're like 2 or 3 games out of being right in the thick of things. You're getting Embiid back in early November. You've seen some good things out of the supporting cast, right? Like Jared McCain starting to break out as a rookie. I know it's a few games. 27 points from a rookie is pretty impressive. Gershon Yabusele, really impressing in this minimum deal coming off of a great Olympics. Obviously they don't have Maxey yet. They're still figuring out how to work in Paul George and make everything fit. And we don't know how healthy Embiid's going to be all year. I get it. There's a lot to work through here. But it's not like the season has totally gone off the rails yet. And I think there are things to be positive about.
You said something there, and I think the operative word is one that you weren't really focused on. You said it's not like the season has gone off the rails yet. The yet is the operative word. That's what always happens for the Sixers. I think it's interesting that no matter who my co-host is on this program, that whenever you sit in that seat, you're invariably like, Bill does this, Ashley's done it, Brad has done it, where people will say to me, like, the Sixers situation is not that dire. And then they go on like this explanation about why it's all going to work out. And then I just am here to refer you to history, and that it never does. It never, ever works out. Now, you're absolutely right that the Eastern Conference is abysmal. I mean, you've got the Cavs who are still undefeated at 12-0, and the Celtics. Cavs are 6 games up on the third place team, the Pacers. Everybody below the Cavs and the Celtics is 500 or worse. It's a truly, truly awful conference. I just don't have history would suggest that this is too much of a hole for the Sixers to dig out of. Starting 1-6, only 12 teams have made the playoffs in NBA history. Starting 1-7, only 1 team has made the finals in NBA history. And that happened back in 77, 78 with the Supersonics. So like, I don't know that they're going to achieve anything significant. And then on top of that, just incorporating 11 new players under the best of circumstances is difficult. That's a hard thing to do. The Sixers never have the best of circumstances. I'm excited to see Embiid play tonight. I just am not buying it. I just, initially I was like, hey, what a great job they did rebuilding on the fly. And then I was like, oh, right. Of course they're the Sixers.
John, remember 2 years ago, we had 2 play-in teams make the conference finals, and then the Heat, as an 8
Yeah.
seed, make the NBA finals. Like, I think the way the NBA is set up now, where when you get to the playoffs, like, very few teams are fully healthy and matchups dictate so much. I don't think it's that crazy to think, oh, we can start 2-7 and then like get our act together, finish above 500, and then get hot when it counts. Like the Lakers did that in
I
2023.
mean,
The Sixers are better than those Lakers were. They're 2-8 start.
yeah, but okay. So they're playing the Knicks tonight. And I want to ask you about the Knicks real quick, but they're playing the Knicks tonight. Let's just say for the sake of argument, they win that game. Tomorrow, they're not going to play Embiid or PG, and Maxey's out against the Cavs, who are smoking hot. That's an L. And so you're kind of like right back to square one again. How much are you getting out of Embiid? How much are you getting out of PG? I just have questions and concerns. I want to ask you about the Knicks though, because I was discussing this with Bill yesterday. 4-4, second in offensive rating. Offensively, Cat has been everything that was advertised. Defensively, he has been less than stellar. Everybody is scoring at the rim on him. What do you make of the Knicks so far?
I am concerned about the defense. I mean, it feels a little Pacers-y last year where the profile is like historically good on offense and They're not nearly as bad as the early season Pacers were on defense, but there's a lot to be desired there. I'm as concerned about Mikal Bridges as I am about Towns on defense. Obviously, Mikal Bridges is a lot better, but you gave up all of those picks
Yes.
thinking you were getting an all defense caliber wing. And I think part of the problem here is that OG Anunoby has been really the only very good defender they've had on the perimeter.
Yep.
And the idea of protecting Cat starts like it did in Minnesota last year with we have Anthony Edwards, we have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, we have Jaden McDaniels. You can't beat someone at the rim if you can't get by your man on the perimeter. The Knicks have
Yep.
had that problem this year. And I think first and foremost, this starts with getting Mikal Bridges back up to as close to he was when he was the Defensive Player of the Year runner-up in Phoenix. He hasn't been close to that. I think Josh Hart has been up and down on defense. And they haven't, it's going to be a while until they get Mitchell Robinson back. But like, I came into this season thinking Mitchell Robinson is just trade bait. Now I'm thinking we might need to see how that too big alignment works. So
Yeah.
there are problems here. I'm not ready to make any long-term declarative statements. We're going to do overreactions later. I don't have a Knicks overreaction. I'm still very much in wait and see mode, but the defense is a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And for all the reasons you just outlined, I mean, I expected exactly what you said, that those wing defenders would really like cover up for and paper over some of like Cat's deficiencies. Like you said, you can't get to the rim if you can't get by your man. And then, in retrospect, what the Wolves built where they went, and got Rudy Gobert, and like a lot of us, certainly me, were like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not going to work. And then you understood afterwards why they did it and why it did work. And Mitchell Robinson would be a very helpful piece, you'd think, on paper, if you could try to like do, a knockoff version of that, but not having him is a bummer. In retrospect, in a parallel universe, if this thing doesn't course correct, the overpay on Bridges is going to seem really significant. And also them pulling the trigger on Cat when now all of a sudden in Milwaukee, like maybe if this thing doesn't fix itself and Giannis starts to get a little antsy, like if you could undo it and there's another world where like you end up trading you pay a little less for Bridges and you've got more stuff and you don't get Cat and you end up with Giannis, wouldn't that look nice?
It would, but I'd also just say, like, they didn't give up that much for Cat, right? Like, they gave up DiVincenzo and Randall. What if you still make the Cat trade, but then you don't make the Bridges trade and you have all your picks to go
That's
get
what I'm talking
Giannis
about.
afterward? Yeah, like, I mean, Cat and Giannis would have been a great fit, but that's obviously neither here nor there because it's not happening. The idea for trading for Bridges, at the time, I graded the Knicks well for it. I think the idea they had was that we're going to get the absolute best version of him. We're going to get the
Yeah.
guy who was the Defensive Player of the Year runner-up in Phoenix. We're going to get
Plays
the
every
guy
night.
who was a like really good all-star level creator at first in Brooklyn, and then you're going to get the best three-point shooting sprinkled throughout.
Yep.
The problem is you can't really pick and choose what parts of a player's game are going to translate, and right now they've kind of gotten the worst of all of it. I think that's fixable.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be better, but yeah, they paid for a version of Bridges that I don't know has ever really existed over a sustained period.
Yeah, right now it's not great. I would bet on Bridges fixing it because he's been such a consistent, smart, good player. But yeah, there was concerns about the shot to start, and defensively he hasn't looked like himself. I'm with you that when they traded for him, it made sense on paper. I still think it was like a gross overpay. But the idea of Bridges makes sense on that team. It's just that they haven't gotten that version of him yet. Another big debut or return rather tonight. Klay Thompson back to the Bay Area. Mavs against the Golden State Warriors tonight. It's been kind of an up and down, a little bit of a rocky start for Klay in Dallas. He's only shooting 35.5% from deep. Last season, don't forget, he started out pretty slow from deep and still ended up shooting 39% from three. And I think it was 41% after the break. So he came on hot. But what kind of reception do you think he gets tonight?
If it's not warm, I'm going to lose it. I don't want to hear a single boo. Like, I'm sorry, that's a core piece of a dynasty. Like, I know we did the thing with Paul George where there was the ridiculous booing, but like, okay, I guess he never made the finals there, blah, blah, blah. Like, if I hear a single boo, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be that. I mean, Steph was asked about it, and Steph said that he's going to get a warm reception and he deserves it. I thought that what Klay and Draymond said about this was interesting, though. Klay tried to do the "it's just another game in November" bit. Are you buying that? I just want to stop on Klay for a second because what do you think Klay feels? The Mavs are 5-5. They could easily be, like what 7-3. They lost two really close games this past weekend, but they're
They got
five and
Jokic.
five. Yeah, they got Jokic, but they could have a better record. They're okay. But what do you think he thinks about watching him? He leaves, and then all of a sudden, Golden State is kind of rebooting this thing on the fly and having like a real renaissance without him.
I wonder about that because there was all this talk, after the fact, after he left Golden State, about like how last year was so hard and that he didn't feel as much like a priority within the organization. And like, yeah, it sting me a little bit too if Buddy Hield came in and made all these threes and people are saying like, oh yeah, Buddy Hield is the new Splash Brother. Like Buddy Hield is doing the things that Klay Thompson used to do. Like it almost feels like showing up at your college reunion and seeing your ex with somebody much younger. Like it's hard not to look at yourself and maybe feel like, oh, where does that leave me now?
Yeah, I mean he's human, right? I know that he's Clay, so he's pretty quirky, and I understand. It's not surprising that he did. It's just another game in November to me. Nobody actually believes that. One that I do kind of believe is Draymond was talking about this, and he said, "I'm going to run right through his chest," and it kind of gives a little Kobe in the Olympics against Pau Gasol, where he just like mowed him over on like the first play. I could see that actually happening.
Does Draymond ever need a reason to run through somebody's chest? Like, if you told me he just did that to like Gary Payton at shoot around today, I'd buy it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I do think there are some shades of Kobe and Powell in the Olympics there, but like ultimately, I think Draymond is just going to do what Draymond is going to do, and I think it's the sort of thing where like he might do that in the first quarter of the game, and then they share a huge hug afterward because like everything aside, these are still two guys that won 4 championships together, and like are two of the pillars of the dynasty of the last decade of NBA history. So all I'm hoping for out of this is like basketball aside, just like let's have some nice moments for Klay. I hope the fans are gracious to him. I mean, if they're not, then we got to have a real talk about like
I'd be
what
shocked.
booing entails at this point in the NBA. But
That
I don't know.
doesn't feel
That's all
like a
I'm really
boo
hoping
fan
for.
base, especially with
No,
Clay.
it's not. Like I think he's going to get a total ovation. I think they're going to love him, and I think this is the sort of thing where the relationship had run its course on the
Yeah,
court. That doesn't mean the relationship between the player and the team needs to be broken. This isn't Kevin Garnett in Minnesota, for example, where there's like so much lingering bad blood that this is gonna boil over and like last into retirement. I think he's gonna get a great reception, and like whatever happens with him as a Maverick, we're always gonna remember him first and foremost as a Warrior.
yeah, and he's gonna get a statue eventually. And time heals all wounds. By the way, you had mentioned storylines and that being really important to building up the NBA Cup. I think we have some built-in storylines here, right? I mean, we're talking about Clay going back and playing the Warriors. They're in the same group. And by the way, in the Eastern Conference, the two best teams in the Eastern Conference,
Oh
the Cavs
yeah.
and the Celtics, are in the same group. So I think that'll juice it a little bit.
If we get the 15-0 Cleveland Cavaliers traveling to Boston to play the defending champs in an NBA Cup game, like I can't express what a big deal that would be to the NBA Cup, right?
Yeah,
Like to have a game of that much import. Like I'm trying to think of when was the last regular season game that meant that much, right? Like, remember how big the 24-0 Warriors got as their streak really
sure.
started to snowball? How every game was much watched territory? I think if the Cavs get to 15-0 and their next three opponents are very, very beatable, it's all lottery teams. If they get to 15-0, then we start going on Warriors watch. And the Celtics game sort of becomes the beginning of something where if Cleveland wins that, suddenly every Cavs game becomes appointment television. And lo and behold, the Celtics game is during the Cup, and then they'll have plenty of Cup games in that run. So that's the one that I'm really looking out for is like this could be transformative for the NBA Cup as a whole.
we're gonna do overreactions in a second. That was on my list. The Cavs being 15-0 going. It's not even an overreaction. I'm just like betting on it because you've got the Sixers on Wednesday, and then after that they got the Bulls and the Hornets. I'd be shocked if they're not 15-0 going into that game, and like how much fun that'll be and how much attention you'll get on it. Now, the Bulls could have pulled off the upset last night. And frankly, your Brooklyn Nets, who you and producer Aaron were talking about being plucky well in advance of me noticing that they are, could have also handed them their first L. But I think 15-0 going into that Celtics game is highly likely. They're going to be heavy favorites in their 3 games between now and then next Wednesday. So we're setting this up for what could be a very fun NBA Cup game between those two teams. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And then on the other side, as we do on Tuesdays, it's going to be overreaction time. This is Beyond the Arc.
Saturdays at 3:30. It's big time. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Just a reminder, in addition to being a podcast, you can find us on YouTube. We are live Monday through Friday at noon Eastern. You can check us out over there at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Sam, you're normally with me on Thursdays. This is your first Tuesday. On Tuesday, we do overreactions. I'm excited for you to do this bit with me. You get to go first. Give me an overreaction.
I spent a very inordinate amount of time trying to find a Jokic overreaction. And
Okay.
the problem with that was that everything I thought of, I would think about
real?
for 5 minutes, and it's like, no, it's legit. Here's what I came up with. I think the gap between Nikola Jokic and whoever you think the second best player in the NBA is bigger than the gap between LeBron and whoever you thought was number 2 at his peak was. Right? Like, I think
Wow.
we're at a point now where the gap between Jokic and number 2 is bigger than it's ever been since the Michael Jordan era. And if you look at the numbers, like by most of the advanced metrics, by VORT, by VPM, the gap between Jokic and blank is bigger than the gap between LeBron and Durant was, and LeBron and Curry was. And that's kind of the key to this. LeBron had Durant and Curry, who were both like potential top 10 all-time players. Luka's not that yet. Giannis isn't that yet. Wemby's not there yet. It's kind of just Jokic totally in a tier by himself. My favorite stat of the entire year across the entire league. How many times do you think Nikola Jokic is touching the basketball this year per game?
Great question.
It is 115.8. That number is significant because the NBA record is 101.1. And it is owned by Nikola Jokic, who has led the league in touches per game, I think 6 of the last 7 years. So Jokic already was carrying this inordinate offensive load. This year, it's gone up by like 15%. No player is more involved in their offense, maybe ever, than Jokic is right now. Like LeBron's high is like 92. It's almost impossible for a player to impact the game on offense as much as he does.
We're at a spot now, yet again, we came into the season going, oh, it's going to be Luka's year to be MVP. It's going to be SGA's year maybe to challenge for MVP. Who knows, maybe Giannis can climb back into it. Everybody was just like, okay, we've had enough. It's 3 of 4 for Joker. We're going to be looking for reasons this season to not give it to him and probably not finding any. I mean, if he keeps this up, I don't know how he doesn't win it again.
I feel so stupid because before the season, I baked in all of that stuff. He's outside of the typical MVP age range. Like, I thought it was going to be a narrative thing where, like, oh, this is Tatum's year, this is SGA's year, blah, blah, blah. And even when Aaron Gordon got hurt, his odds were at plus 750, and he was 4th on the list. And I'm like, here's what you guys are going to do. Let them lose a bunch of games without Aaron Gordon, and then buy in at 4 figures. And then he just does this, and, like, 5 days later, plus 220 favorite, like the value's all gone.
Yeah,
like, we all kind of know at this point.
And the Embiid one, the one where Embiid won, I thought that there was a case to make for Embiid, and then the playoffs rolled around and Joker steamrolled everybody and had a historic playoffs and won a championship. And he was like, and everybody went, oh yeah, no, he's definitely the MVP. So that's a good one.
We're
I want
gonna
to give
look
you one.
back on that Embiid MVP like we look back on the Derrick Rose MVP, where it's like LeBron really should have won 5 in a row, and Jokic probably should have won 5 in a row.
Yeah, probably. So you're talking about usage and running through Joker and him touching the ball. To a lesser extent, you also mentioned LeBron. The Lakers, I said this to Bill the other day. The Lakers have kind of stumbled into something here by virtue of JJ Redick getting angry at D'Angelo Russell. And my reaction is point LeBron is the way, man. Like these last couple of games, granted, he had back-to-back triple doubles, but they were against the Sixers and the Raptors. I'm going to take the opposition out of it for a second, but JJ threw a temper tantrum and put D'Lo on the bench. And then by virtue of that, it was just point LeBron and what we saw in the Olympics where LeBron was orchestrating everything and moving guys around and doing his, not like he needs to do a Joker impersonation. He's probably the greatest player of all time, but he's doing his version of that this season at 39 years old. And one, it works. Playing through him and getting everybody into the right spots rather than just like making him like an offensive focal point and just like kind of a hub for all the other spokes looks good. And then as an addendum to that, adding D'Angelo Russell to the bench unit solves one of your issues, which was where are we getting scoring off the bench? Now, I don't think Cam Reddish is your answer as your fifth starter, but I do kind of like this idea of point LeBron.
Yeah, we did the Cam Reddish mirage last year where like right around now during the in-season tournament, there was all this talk of like, oh my God, Cam Reddish is this great defender now. And LeBron has put so much faith in him and he passed to him for the game winner in Miami. And like, this all feels great. Like the Cam Reddish thing is whatever. He's a placeholder. They won a championship with LeBron playing point guard. And they've spent the past 5 years moving away from
not doing it.
I think a lot of that has been LeBron induced, where he just doesn't want to carry that kind of load anymore. So we give up all that stuff for Westbrook and give up all that stuff for Dennis Schroeder and all that stuff for D'Angelo Russell. Like they keep trying to find a guy who can take that load off of LeBron when it's kind of become clear that you're wasting LeBron if you don't have him play point guard. I think Austin Reeves
is so good at it. He's so good at it.
I mean, look, there's a reason he's like arguably the best player of all time, right? Like you want the ball in his hands and you want him being the one who makes these decisions. I think Austin Reeves is the perfect quote unquote LeBron point guard in that he is point guard sized and he is a very underrated shot creator. It's nice to have another guy like that on the floor just so LeBron doesn't have to do everything. But having LeBron, Reeves, and Russell together, you're just tilting way too much of the team towards shot creation when you already have one of the best shot creators of all time. So yeah, Cam Reddish is a placeholder. He's not going to be the guy long term. If January or February rolls around and you can get a legitimate 3-and-D guy to be your other guard next to Reeves and then LeBron can just be the ball handler, like now you're really starting to cook.
I wonder if D'Angelo Russell will, because like a couple of games coming off the bench is one thing. Is D'Angelo Russell going to buy into being their sixth man and running that second unit for the entire season? I wonder, but that's a JJ problem. Give me another overreaction.
I think the Thunder are going to be fine without Chet. And I want to stress that, like, fine is relative. I don't think they're going to win every game by double digits like they were when they had him. But
everybody's 6'8".
Yeah, we saw last night, like, what it's going to look like without him, where, yeah, they are very small. Everyone on their team plays bigger than their size. And, like, I went and I looked at the matchup data. Who has Alex Caruso guarded the most this year? Here's the list. Here's the top 10. Ivica Zubac, Michael Porter Jr., Draymond Green, Jamal Murray, DeAndre Ayton, Jonathan Kuminga, Julian Strawther, Nikola Jokic, Norman Powell, and Goga Bitadze. Like, a lot of centers on that list.
That's pretty
They have a lot of guys like that where, like, Jalen Williams can defend bigger than his size, and Aaron Wiggins can defend bigger than his size. You go up and down that list. They have plenty of guys who can function as a short-term center, and they don't have to wait 8 to 10 weeks before they get a big back. They just have to wait until Isaiah Hartenstein comes back, which, I mean, even if you go the more aggressive or the more conservative route and you look at the schedule and say, okay, he'll be back by Christmas. You look at the schedule. They don't have any Jokic games. They don't have any Embiid games. They have 2 Pelicans games, but Zion is hurt. So you've got an Anthony Davis game in there. You've got a Sabonis game in there. You've got a Bam game in there. But, like, there just aren't that many teams and that many bigs who are really going to be able to punish them. Meanwhile, they took 46 threes last night, And all of that space helped SGA score 45. So I think they're
Yeah.
going to play differently, but I think they're going to be okay.
You know what? That was my initial reaction too, that it sucks. It sucks for Chad. It sucks for OKC, but I think that they've got the depth to withstand it. And as you mentioned, Hartenstein comes back to, sooner than Chet. And then all of a sudden that solves the problem. Now, last year, size, both height and actual physical size was a problem for them. They weren't a great rebounding team. I do wonder how that'll affect their rebounding in the interim. But yeah, I'm with you that, they'll just run out a bunch of 6-8 lineups and shoot a bunch of threes and open up space. And I think that they're going to be okay. Not going to be okay. I'm already calling it. The Pelicans are cooked. They're going to miss the playoffs. They're 3-8. I don't even know that this is an overreaction. I just think that this is the way that the season is going for them. Zion is out indefinitely. DeJounte Murray's still out. CJ McCollum's still out. Herb Jones still out. Jordan Hawkins went down. They just got Trey Murphy back. And then right before you and I started recording this show, Jose Alvarado is out now too. Absolutely brutal stretch. I don't know where you were, in terms of plotting the Pelicans coming into this season, but I thought Griff did a pretty good job assembling this team. I had them as a solid, top end play-in team, back end playoff team. I thought that they depth wise, they had some nice depth. DeJounte Murray was going to pair nicely with Zion. You're going to get center Zion out there. And then, Brandon Ingram in a contract year where he needs to play for, whatever's happening next. I thought all these pieces would mesh pretty well. Now, none of them are out there. They're the hospital Pelicans. They look like the Grizzlies from last year.
I was going to say, it feels like they're having the JV version of the year the Grizzlies just had. Mm-hmm. And that's not the worst thing in the grand scheme of things. If you look at where the Grizzlies are now, where they've discovered all of these really useful role players like Scottie Pippen and Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams, they discovered all of these guys through the nightmare that was last year, and that's paying major dividends this year. The Pelicans are kind of going through a version of that where, man, Brandon Boston looks really good. He looks like somebody who's going to be a long-term actual NBA player, and they wouldn't have discovered that if they hadn't had all these injuries. But yeah, I came into the year very high on them, and I had Zion as a stealth MVP candidate. I thought the Zion at center stuff was going to be really interesting. Now we have to face the reality that they weren't probably going to re-sign Brandon Ingram, who's had a pretty good start to the year, just because that would make them a tax team, and they're not going to pay the tax. So we got to start thinking about the Ingram trades again. And then you start to wonder, how sustainable is this core with Zion's health, right? You have to have him healthy for a full year for any of this to matter. And that hasn't really happened yet, except for, I think, his second year.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this can be a positive in the way that it was for Memphis, but at least with Memphis, we had some faith that, Ja will be back and Ja will be fine. With Zion, it's really hard to have that same faith.
Yeah, it really is. All right, one more each, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Hit me.
I'm worried Brook Lopez might be washed. I wanted to do
that whole team. You should be worried that whole team, except for Giannis, is washed.
I just wanted to key in here for a second because the whole theory of that team is, okay, we have depth issues, but man, our top four is really good. Mm. And we have this really unique center that's the perfect guy to put next to Giannis. He's taking 3.72s per game. He's not doing anything inside the arc. He's never getting fouled. He's not making his threes. He's making 27% of them. The thing that has me most distressed here is that he leads the league in contested shots every year. And that's just a function of the role he plays in Milwaukee's defense as kind of a stationary rim protector. Yeah, if you're that big and you're that good as a rim protector, you're going to contest a bunch of shots. At his peak, he was at around 19 per game. He's at 12 right now. And if you watch him play defense, he's still very, very good when you're just getting a straight drive to the rim. He doesn't have to move. He just put his hands up and contest. I don't think he can really move well enough to rotate anymore. I don't think he has that chasing a loose ball gear at all anymore. I am getting really nervous about Brook Lopez specifically watching the Bucks.
Yeah, they got a lot of problems. I mean, Dame has played pretty well, and Giannis has played very well, and they're still bottom of the Eastern Conference. And part of that is they can't guard anybody on the perimeter. And now if Brook Lopez is washed, then they are absolutely detonation city. I mean, they can't, if you can't guard anybody on the perimeter and you can't protect the rim either, and his shot isn't falling, then Brook Lopez becomes not very useful. My last one here, and this is for both you and producer Aaron as an homage. The Nets are oddly fun and compelling. You guys kind of called this a couple weeks ago, and I laughed at both of you. They're 5-6. They almost gave the Cavs their first L. Jordy Fernandez is doing way more with less than I expected. Everybody after they moved on from Mikal Bridges expected. This is Tank City. They're trying to get Cooper Flag. They're a little too good for their own good. And part of this is where it's going to be a bridge too far for me, and I'm going to let you take it over here. But I'm just going to point out a stat line here. Ben Simmons had 12 assists last night. In 22 minutes, he was 3 for 5 from the floor. He did not take a three, and he did not shoot a free throw, but he did have 12 assists.
Yeah, on my overreactions list, I had the Nets are too good to tank, which is kind of a disaster for them.
It is.
Because they traded all of this draft capital from other teams. Phoenix,
and they got their own pick back.
To get their own picks back. That's terrible management, right? If you're trading for your own picks at a premium, you'd better be pretty sure that you're going to be terrible. And I was saying this all offseason. Hey, they have too many NBA caliber guys.
Yes.
You should really be trying to get rid of Cam Johnson. You should really be trying to get rid of Dorian Finney-Smith. Now they're stuck with these guys until December 15th. They're going to win like 10 more games than they want to because they're too good. But I'm glad that you're finally on board with Ben Simmons as my buyout candidate dream, because he's looking not like Ben Simmons, but like, as I said, a quality low minute, role player, like a backup center in a unique situation.
Like a 22-minute a game small, but not even that small center, like a Draymond East type of player, although he's not like, this really says how far he's fallen offensively. He's not nearly as useful offensively beyond being a passer and rebounder as Draymond is. At least Draymond can like periodically do some things offensively in terms of scoring the ball. But that's the part where I go, I don't believe that. Right. Like I agree with you wholeheartedly that Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson need to be shipped out at the earliest possible convenience because they need to lose some more games. I am not buying the Ben Simmons, renaissance is real. He's always been a good passer, but come on, 3 for 5. And he just has evidently decided I'm never going to shoot a free throw again.
Like, again, we've had this conversation before. It's a penny stock. Ben Simmons was like, I was worried coming into the year he might like retire after his contract ended.
Yeah.
Like, no, he looks like an NBA player. He looks like somebody you could stick on a playoff team and then get 10 good minutes out of him in a big game. That's all I'm asking. He's met that criteria thus far.
God, that's such a low bar. All right, let's wrap up with it's such a low bar where you're like 10 minutes and, maybe he won't hurt you. Team of the night. We usually wrap up the show with team of the night. You hit me first.
I really want to go in on the Clippers, who are now 6-5 without Kawhi Leonard, and Norm Powell is, at least to my eye, probably the front runner for most improved player. And he's the most improved player in the way that I think the award was designed for, where we give it to a guy who's been around for a while and has taken a big jump, not just, let's give it to the first-time All-Star who's 24 years old. None of that. He's averaging something like 25 points a game so far this season. I don't know what the exact number is.
Career high.
He's just been incredible
for them. Percentage.
He has been incredible for them. He's been an awesome secondary creator. The defense is so much better than it has any right to be. All of those big wings they added over the summer have been huge for them. Like, I came into the year thinking oh no, they're going to give the Thunder Cooper Flag. I think barring extreme injuries, we can kind of move away from that. They're fun to watch. I enjoy it. It's Harden, Powell, and a bunch of long wings.
Here's a bonus overreaction for you. Norm Powell's the best Clipper.
Ooh, I like that. That's spicy.
Yeah, he's the best Clipper. He's very good. You know that their net rating with Harden off the floor is almost +7. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't think Harden's a problem. He's actually been pretty good this year, but I'm with you that the Clippers have been a fun watch. This one's an easy for me. I'm going to go chalk on team of the night. It's the Cavs. They're 12-0, man. I mean, like, this team is rolling. They could have lost, probably should have lost last night. And then they decided to go on in the third quarter. They went on a 9-0 run when Kenny Atkinson just decided, okay, our starters aren't getting it done. And he went with 5 reserves. And that's how they blasted their way back into the game. And your Brooklyn Nets, Aaron's Brooklyn Nets, and I guess the team of Beyond the Arc Brooklyn Nets could have handed them an L too, and they didn't. So yeah, we're barreling towards 15-0 going into that Celtics game.
Dean Wade as the backup center is like a really interesting wrinkle that they just threw out for that great bench run. I don't think it's something we're going to see too much as long as Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are both on the team, because you're going to stagger them most of the time. It's a nice little weapon to have sitting in your back pocket should the opportunity ever come to turn Allen into a wing. For now, they're 12-0. I'm not going to break that team up.
It's been
But
super fun.
they've been incredible. They're the
Shockingly fun.
cardiac Cavs with all these comebacks.
Good for Cleveland, man. They deserve it. All right, before we get out of here, we mentioned that you did a piece for CBSSports.com where you fixed the NBA Cup in its second year. In addition to that, what else you got cooking?
I think I'm going to write about the Lakers this week. I want to write about this Cam Reddish, D'Angelo Russell starting brouhaha. Other than that, like,
brouhaha is a great word.
Yeah, I like my old-timey words. But yeah, let's see how the week goes. I'm sure there'll be reactions to what happens tonight with Embiid and with Klay going back. But yeah, always got stuff cooking.
Head over to CBSSports.com and read Sam's stuff. He'll be back with us next Thursday. For now, though, that's going to do it for us today. For Sam Quinn from CBSSports.com, I am John Gonzalez. We thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to be back tomorrow with Bill. We'll see you then.